Well, hello, everybody. My name is Rose, and I am a part of an amazing team called Second Harvest. So on behalf of my team, we want to welcome you to our event, Tackling Food Waste from Field to Fork. We hope that you have a good time. That's our end goal today, is for you to have a good time and hopefully come out with one or two learnings that you could use for your food waste journey. So please take a moment at this time to familiarize yourself with the Zoom features that are available to you. You would have noticed that upon entry to the event, your mic has been muted and your video has been turned off. But there is a chat function at the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. So feel free to let us know if you're running into tech issues, have any questions or concerns. We're here to help you. So we have two of our colleagues, Krish and Roberto, monitoring that chat. So yeah, let us know how we can make your time with us more comfortable. The session is also being recorded, and we'd be more than happy to share with you the recording of this event after it's all done. So to start, I'd love for you to take a few seconds to complete our first poll of the event. Krish, if you wouldn't mind putting that poll up, that would be fabulous. Outside of the country? Amazing. Perfect. I'm going to quickly end that poll because it looks like, all right, two seconds in. Sounds great. Awesome. All right, well, thanks so much for the input. It's fantastic to see a national turnout and some even international folks joining us. So you're in for a treat. This topic is fabulous. We're a little bit biased, but that's okay. So while we meet on a virtual platform at the moment, we do want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the indigenous peoples of all of the lands that we're currently on today. And we do this to reaffirm our commitment and our responsibility in improving relationship between nations and improving our own understanding of local indigenous peoples and their cultures. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call Canada home. So please join me in acknowledging the harms and mistakes of the past and to consider how we can, in our own very special way, try to move in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So thank you very much. All right. So for those of us who are not very familiar with Second Harvest, we are Canada's largest food rescue organization, and we are an expert in food recovery. Our mission is dual. It's twofold, right? We are no waste, no hunger. And it's our commitment to the planet that is both environmental and community focused. So we have an incredible 35-year history of rescuing unsold, surplus, amazing, avoidable food and redirecting that food away from landfills and into the hands of non-for-profits and charities who provide it to communities that are in need. So it's my fantastic pleasure to welcome our fearless leader, Lori Nichols, to do the opening remarks.
Thanks so much, Rose. That was wonderful. And good afternoon, everyone. Good morning to those of you on the West Coast. Thank you so much for joining us today on Food Waste Friday. I'd like to especially thank the Ontario Trillium Foundation for their support of our education programming through a fantastic OTFC grant. And it's because of their support, we were able to provide this program today. But that's not all. It's because Second Harvest has an amazing training and education team who curated a fantastic 90-minute program, Tackling Food Waste from Field to Fork. And the subject matter clearly resonates for many, as there were about 500 people registered online, and many others are requesting recordings who can't be here today. And we're all here because we know that there is a better way forward than the path we're on. Where nearly 60% of all the food we produce in Canada, 60% is lost or wasted. we produce enough excess food to feed every Canadian for 5 months. And yet we're feeding landfills. And this is all happening while 1 in 7 Canadians are living with food insecurity. And while not all food waste is edible, most of it actually is. About 11.2 million metric tons could be recovered, but instead it goes to landfill where it rots and creates methane gas and CO2, direct contributors to the climate crisis. And we need to act because Canada is warming at a higher rate than the rest of the world. Clearly, it's not sustainable. And even in these unprecedented times of COVID, we don't have a food shortage problem. We have a food systems problem, we have a distribution problem, and again, we have 1 in 7 Canadians facing food insecurity. And we really just need to connect the dots. So that's why we're here today, to hear about the amazing findings of a year-long waste reduction project and to hear from experts that are working every day in an effort to bring awareness and innovation to the food loss and waste problem. I want to thank you again for being here and for everything each and every one of you are doing to make sure good food gets used for its intended purpose, to feed people and not landfills. And each of us here today is changing the world. Make no mistake about it. Each of us here today can change the world, and it's needed now more than ever. So on that happy note, let's get started.
Fantastic. Well, thank you, Lori, for setting the tone for the event. It's definitely going to be one for the books, I hope. And so I would love to welcome Jennifer Willis, our Ontario Trillium Foundation speaker, to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to have been asked to say a few words as a volunteer with the Ontario Trillium Foundation's Toronto Grant Review team. Rose, I want to thank you for that beautiful land acknowledgement that you made at the top of the call. We gratefully acknowledge the long history of First Nations and Métis people in Ontario. Since 1982, the OTF has been making strategic investments in the nonprofit sector, helping build healthier and more vibrant communities. And improving access to food goes a long way towards doing that. The Trillium Foundation is an agency of the Government of Ontario and one of Canada's leading grant-making organization. And thanks to the funding that we receive from the Ontario government, we're able to award over 600 grants a year to nonprofit organizations across the province. This has been a particularly difficult year for so many people and for the nonprofit sector itself. The determination and innovation that you've shown speaks volumes for your commitment to those who rely on the services that Second Harvest offers the community. So thank you. Last year, as Lori mentioned, the OTF gave Second Harvest a grant of $75,000, a seed grant to develop an e-learning program with a focus on reducing food waste. You made a strong case about the impact that a seed grant could have. And for anyone unfamiliar with what a seed grant is, it's really a granting program that enables nonprofits to conduct feasibility studies or pilot new programs for up to 1 year to see if they can take root and grow. And now that you're nearing the end of your grant, I'm delighted to have the opportunity to hear how it's progressed and what your findings are. I think it's going to be a terrific program today. The OTF was pleased that this grant could help with the costs of the project, to help fund the design of the e-learning modules, the web platform, and more, as well as with some of the staffing costs. But ultimately, this was a grant that was focused on people and on the community. And I really look forward to sharing what I'll hear today with my OTF colleagues. Congratulations to this wonderful team, and thank you for including me.
Oh, thank you for being here. My goodness. Thank you, Jen, for that very kind words and for the acknowledgement. So we really appreciate OTF support, and we look forward to actualizing the project and for sharing to everybody today the impact of that project. So, okay, the avoidable crisis of food waste. Why don't we dig a little deeper? Hold it. Let me share with you my screen, and let's do just that. Perfect. Okay. Give me 2 seconds, folks. All right. So for this part of the event, we would like to take a moment to shed light on the avoidable crisis of food waste in Canada and to unpack the main reasons why food is thrown away across the food chain. We are also really excited to share with you the impact of our e-learning modules and how you can reap the benefits of our training. So in January 2019, we invested in some research to better understand the depth and breadth of food loss and waste in Canada. It's the first study that's ever been done that captures primary data across the food supply chain using a standard measurement. And our study actually showed pretty troubling results. So our research showed that 58% of all food produced in Canada is wasted every single year. 58%, folks. That's the equivalent weight of 35.5 million metric tons, or the equivalent weight of 350 blue whales. But not only that, we also found that 32% of that waste is completely avoidable, and it amounts to 11.2 million metric tons, which is the equivalent weight of 90 CN towers. Holy crap. And when we dug a little bit deeper, we also found that food loss and waste occurs throughout the entire food chain, from production to consumption. So if you look at this graph, the largest contributor to overall food loss and waste are in the production and processing stage of the supply chain, which is about 25 and 34%, was 24 and 34% respectively. Manufacturing and household, as you can see here, is about 13 and 14%. And then hotels, restaurant, institutions are collectively at around 9%. And then interestingly, the retail sector over here is only 4%. We also found that Canada's food loss and waste, the problem is actually one of the worst in the entire world. So get this, right? So we produce enough food to feed 52 million people. Canada's population is nearing 37 million people, which then means that we have enough food to feed everyone for free for almost 5 months. And yet 4 million people, 4 million Canadians are food insecure. And with the COVID pandemic, that number has increased exponentially. I think you and I can both agree that this really doesn't make any sense. In addition to that, if food waste was a country, it would be the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases in the world. So food that ends up in landfill creates methane gas, which is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. And food loss and waste really pose a significant environmental impact. And this is why all of us, from farmers to manufacturers, from food producers to distributors, from stores to homes, we need to rethink how we view excess food and change our habits so that people can benefit and an environmental crisis can be avoided. So let's look at the issues. So the issues of food loss and waste is complex. It's a wicked problem. It's challenging, but it's really vital for us to really understand how and why and where it happens. So knowing the root causes of food loss and waste really enables us to develop sustainable solutions. So here are 3 main causes of food loss and waste that we found in our research. The first one is that there's a lot of confusion about the date labeling system in Canada. Oh my goodness, we'll unpack that in a little bit. The second one is that food businesses are incredibly wary, actually, to donate surplus food to social agencies and support communities. And the third one is that there is a lack of measurement and awareness of how much food and why food is wasted at businesses and at homes. So let's take the opportunity now to unpack all of this a little bit. Confusion around date labeling is one of the leading causes of food loss and waste in Canada. It's truly in date coding that we have created a monster. And there is 3 reasons why. The first one is that best before dates are set by each manufacturer, and it's actually not determined by regulation. So a manufacturer will put an arbitrary date that is very conservative to protect their brand and to convince us that the food we bought is not safe past the best before date. That's the first reason. The second reason is that our government actually provides very little guidelines over best before dates. Actually, regulation only requires manufacturers to have a best before date for food that has a shelf life of 90 days or less. The sad part about it is that food producers and companies voluntarily put best before dates on product that lasts longer than 90 days, which perpetuates our throwaway culture. And the last one, and perhaps the most important one, is that we often confuse best before dates with expiration dates. Many foods are perfectly safe to eat past the best before date or even close to the best before date. So that begs the question, what the heck is a best before date, right? So by definition, a best before date is a date that is given to a product by the manufacturer, right? It represents an estimate, so it's a guess, to the peak quality or freshness of the product. A best before date is also not a food safety indicator, nor is it the same as an expiration date, which means that you can safely consume food past the date or close to the date if you practice proper food handling and storage, and that the package is not open. That's another reason why I don't specifically like best before dates, because it's actually no longer applicable once you open the package. So that milk can spoil a lot quicker or a lot later. The date becomes irrelevant once that package is opened. Okay, so let's unpack expiration date a little bit then. So these are the dates that you'll also see in some of your products that indicate when the nutritional content of that food may be compromised. And there are only 5 items in Canada that has an expiration date. That's it, folks, just 5. We have nutritional supplements like whey protein powders. We have formulated liquid diets like Ensure. We have meal replacements like Cliff protein bars. We have baby formula and human milk substitutes like Infamilk. And then we have pharmacist sold foods for low energy diets. You can't even buy this at your regular grocery store. You actually need a doctor's prescription. I do also want to say that expiration dates are also not food safety indicator. So really, if you wanted to, you could eat food past the expiration date. Now, we don't recommend that you eat food past the expiration date, because after this date, the nutrients that are needed to support health is no longer there. So in the long run, you might find that you suffer from health conditions. All right, so let's quickly do a quick game. So I would love to pull up a poll, and you will see here, we have 4 questions, and I'd love to know, how long past the best before date do you think these products are safe to eat? And keeping in mind that these items are not opened. Great. Give everybody a few more seconds. Quickly put in those answers. And let's see. So how long do you think best before dates? Do you think dairy and eggs are still safe to eat? Canned fruits and vegetables. We got cereal, flour, oats, pasta, and rice. And then we have protein bars. Perfect. So let's end that poll and see what we have. Okay, so the first one we said, how long past the best before date do you think dairy and eggs are still safe to eat? So keeping in mind that this includes milk. We got 2 weeks, fantastic. Yeah, it's actually 2 weeks past the best before date. Interesting, huh? We have, okay, what about canned fruits and vegetables? It's 1 year. Oh, fantastic. I'm seeing a lot of people that have taken our e-learning modules here. Fantastic. Yeah, it's a year, folks. And if fruits and vegetables are frozen, same deal. You can eat that past close to a year. Then we have cereal, flour, oats, pasta, and rice. We got 1 month, 6 months, 1 year. It's actually 1 year. Okay, so that's fantastic. Yeah, 1 year past the best before date. So don't throw away your old cereal, flour, oats, pasta, and rice. You can keep that for 1 year past the best before date. And then we have how long past the best before date do you think protein bars are still safe to eat? It's actually a never. So protein bars is one of those meal replacements that I talked about earlier. So please don't consume it past the expiration dates, please and thank you. But this just to show you that you can eat food past the best before date and live to tell the tale. I will also say that these are still very much guidelines, and I've definitely eaten food even way past these guidelines. If you want to learn a little bit more about the guidelines that we're talking about, please head to our Second Harvest website and you will find a wonderful table there that shows you how long past the best before date you can still eat our food, but just keeping in mind that those are still just guidelines and you can definitely eat them past those guidelines as well. Perfect, so let's unpack the second issue. All right, so 35 years of working in food recovery, and we have pretty much heard it all. So one of the greatest myths and barriers to any food donation, and I'm sure many of our agencies can relate to this, is this misconception. My business will be liable if we donate food and someone gets sick, right? Interestingly, there's actually a Good Samaritan Act in every province and territory in Canada protecting businesses and individuals who donate food in good faith. So for example, in Ontario, we have something called the Donation of Food Act that protects Ontario companies from any liability when they're donating food in goodwill. So this means that donors are not liable for any damages unless, of course, the donated product is rotten or unfit for human consumption, and that the donor intended to injure or cause the death of a food recipient. So if you don't subscribe to any of those, as a donor, we will be more than happy to receive your food donations. And then the third one, the abundance of food in Canada has really led us to diminish its intrinsic value as a source of life-giving nutrition. This has led us to throw surplus food into the sewers, like milk, for example. Thousands of acres of produce are plowed under because of canceled orders. Fish are caught and then tossed back into the waters to die if they don't match the quota. Consumers play a huge part as well, right? We shop 2-for-1 deals, but let the second item spoil because we didn't need it. We expect abundant portions when we dine, but we don't finish the food. We have really become attuned to wasting food. The good news is that there is a way forward, which is fantastic, but we do need to start by radically rethinking how we value food at each stage of the food chain. And so, to help to tackle these three issues, Second Harvest launched our Food Waste Reduction Project. We launched 3 e-learning modules. We launched a guide to food date labels in Canada to bust myths about food date labels. We launched a donor guide to food recovery that addresses misconceptions on donating food. And we also launched a guide to food waste audits to teach us how to conduct a food waste audit to help us evaluate our food and our food waste behaviors. So each learning module is free. It takes about 10-15 minutes to complete one. They feature facts, key takeaways, videos, interactive games, downloadable resources, you name it, it's there. And after completing the modules, each learner will receive a certificate of completion. So if you have not accessed our e-learning modules yet, please head off to training.secondharvest.ca to access them and reap the benefits. So in addition to launching our e-learnings, we also help support a few of our agencies to conduct food waste audits at their agency location. So you can see here a couple of photos that we took. And oh my goodness, it was actually quite fantastic to see them take the e-guide on food waste audit and actualize it in real life. So you might be asking, great, so what's the impact so far? Well, here's the impact. The impact so far has been really great. So 515 people have completed the e-learning modules. The e-learning modules have also been accessed across Canada from coast to coast to coast. So we have learners from BC all the way to Newfoundland and all the way to the Yukon territories. Learners have given the modules a 5-star rating in overall learning experience. And in our recent survey that we sent out, we found that it actually did increase people's knowledge of food waste prevention practices, which just makes us feel amazing that we're so happy that it's meeting the intended outcomes. On the flip side, 4 agencies have completed their food waste audit and 7 is in progress. And it's actually meeting its intended results as well. One participant mentioned that the audit project has helped their team realize the reason why waste happens at their organization. And another participant mentioned that the food waste audit project showed them that they needed to continue to educate staff and volunteers on best before dates and expiry in order to stop wasting food that's still edible. So again, we encourage you to take advantage of our training offerings today and reap these benefits and more. So please head to training.secondharvest.ca for the e-learning modules, and we hope to see you at our training site. Perfect. All right, folks, we are perhaps entering my favorite part of the event. So I'd love to stop sharing, and I'd love to introduce one of my favorite people at Second Harvest, to be completely honest with you. Our VP of Programs and Partnerships, Kira Toffelmeyer, to moderate this very important discussion today.
Thanks a lot, Rose, for that presentation. And I'm going to have to go do all the e-learning modules again. But as Rose said, my name's Kira, and I oversee the Programs and Partnerships team at Second Harvest. And I am super excited to be here this afternoon with all of you, as Lori mentioned, on Food Waste Friday. And a big hello to everyone tuning in from your various offices and living rooms and bedrooms and kitchen tables across the country and beyond. I recognize it's a Friday afternoon, and so we are going to do our very best to keep everyone awake and engaged over the next 45, 50 minutes, which I don't think is going to be hard at all because we have an absolutely incredible lineup of panelists joining us today. On the main stage of our very affordable event space, we're projecting that there's going to be absolutely no food waste at today's symposium, so thank you very much to every single one of you for making that possible. And as Rose unpacked for us just a moment ago, we know that right now in Canada, we are wasting more food than we consume in devastating volumes, and that this waste has become a key contributor to climate change, which is disproportionately impacting Canadian communities from coast to coast, including many Northern and Indigenous communities. It's costing our economy billions of dollars each year. It's a waste of time and energy, of water and land resources, of human resources. And I think knowing all of that juxtaposed with the fact that in this country, as Rose mentioned, millions of folks are struggling to access the foods they need and want, and a number that we've seen increase during the pandemic, is urgent cause for mobilization. And I think maybe folks have heard about Project Drawdown, but if not, it's a project that outlines the 100 most impactful solutions to climate change. And the environmentalist Paul Hawken noted food waste reduction as one of the top 3 ways to reverse global warming, having a greater impact than solar panels and wind farms combined. So there is a real tangible opportunity for us here as businesses and government and grassroots organizations, as neighbors and consumers, to make change. And there are 5 fascinating folks with us here today who are going to share their perspectives on the issue of food waste and loss and talk to us a little bit more about what making that change can look like in these different landscapes. So I'm going to briefly introduce each of our panelists, and then I'll let them dive into their personal and professional connections to the topic. And we'll have about 10 minutes or so towards the end of the discussion for audience questions. And just as a reminder, folks, right now we have sort of audience that are on mute. So if you can pop any of your questions into the Q&A chat box, we have Second Harvest staff monitoring the chat box, and we'll do our best to answer them. But if your question doesn't get answered, we'll catalog and send over our answers as a follow-up to this symposium. So let's get into it. Joining us here today, we have Chef Chris Zielinski, who is the culinary director and executive chef for all Maple Leaf sports and entertainment properties, including the home of our beloved Raptors and Leafs, the Scotiabank Arena. We have Lalo Alihajiva, the president of Toronto-based nonprofit Road to Zero Waste, which is focused on providing increased food access to low-income communities through community fridges and food recovery, an amazing organization. We have Dr. Mike von Masso, an associate professor at the University of Guelph, interested in how people think about food. Who's recently appointed Ontario Agriculture College's chair in food systems and is host of the podcast Food Focus, which you should check out if you haven't already. We have Ellie Brown with us, the Director of Corporate Sustainabilities at Sobeys, and passionate advocate for waste reduction, who we've had the honor of working with for the last little while. And last but certainly not least, with the most incredible backdrop, which I think is not a fake backdrop, it's a real thing, is Mr. Bob Bloomer, a gastronaut, cookbook author, former Food Network host, 8 times Guinness World Record holder, and an ambassador for the Love Food, Hate Waste campaign. So welcome all of you guys here today. Really pleased that you could be joining us. And I'd like to kick off the discussion today by asking each of our panelists to talk a little bit about the #1 concern you have witnessed in your respective area with regards to the issue of food waste and loss, and maybe if you can, a little bit about how you and your organization is going about addressing it. So we'll start with Chef Chris.
Hello, everybody, and thank you very much for inviting me to this event. I think this is amazing. Love working with Second Harvest. I love working with you guys and trying to support you in any way we can. You know, with the business that I work in, events, obviously right now we don't have a lot of them, but we will get back to them eventually. One of the things that, you know, we've noticed over the years is that customers, you know, and from the F&B side of things, a lot of folks, you know, we are in the business of trying to sell people things. They come to us to eat. I think the value equation we talked about earlier is very relevant in that people sometimes eyes are bigger than their stomach and they want to see more on the plate. So, you know, when I first started working with the company, I noticed there wasn't really a lot of attention put on this. We did collect things. We did, you know, definitely offered things to Second Harvest every year, but we really didn't tap into what was the bigger source. And, you know, I think it wasn't like we didn't try. It wasn't like there wasn't an effort to do it. But I think what really, you know, kind of changed things is really about getting, you know, the company on side with it. You know, we have a lot of people. We have about 4,000 staff, and, you know, it is a cultural shift when you can get everybody to think about, you know, what they can do to contribute to not being part of the problem, but part of the solution. And we've found that basically the passing of information, the sharing of information, the stuff that Lori works really hard on LinkedIn to get done every single day, I see it every day, has really kind of, you know, it's sunk in to the culture of MLSE now, and we've got this great appetite to see what more we can do. It's not easy. Not everybody is going to be all in on it. But it's like any popularity contest. If you get people enthusiastic about the idea and you can demonstrate the results, you will see, you know, a full force of people getting behind the ideas. Now, for us, this goes all the way down to the idea of how much food we put on a plate, because I think when we can tell these kind of stories, we can explain to them why a portion size is the way it is, because this is how much a normal person eats. It doesn't have to be excessive. Likewise, say in a suite or catering situation, where sometimes abundance is the selling point, we've seen a cultural change where event planners and people who are coming to do events with us, they'll look at us and they'll say, listen, how much food are we putting out there? How much is going to be left over? And what are you doing with it if we have it left over? And let's work to find the smallest possible margin on that while keeping everybody happy. That, to me, that's a real shift in the culture. I think people who are throwing parties and they're spending the money are recognizing that they're part of the problem.
And Chef Z, just really quick, picking up on something you said, you talked about in that environment, making it takes time for this idea of reducing our waste and loss to mentally sink into the culture, I think you said. And just what are sort of some of the biggest points of resistance that you heard, and how were you able to address that within the MLSE culture?
Okay, number one, it's going to be too much work. You know what? You've got 1,000 people working on something. It's not that much work. It really, I think at the beginning, everybody kind of said, oh, how are we going to do this? I mean, we went from rescuing about 20,000 meals a year to about 50,000 over the course of 1 year. And I can tell you that it didn't cost us anything extra. There was no extra labor involved. There was nobody who was hard done by the whole situation. In fact, we had quite the opposite, where we had people who were highly enthusiastic about being the cheerleaders for the program and getting and helping to collect the food and doing it at a time, at the course of the night. You think about the third period of a hockey game, there really is no more food being served. We're not really serving any more drinks. Everybody's kind of had their fill at that point. Perfect opportunity to collect food and gather it up and get it down to the fridge so that we can get it to second harvest for the next day.
That's awesome and encouraging. Thank you, Chef Z. I'd like to pass it to Lalo. Can you tell us a little bit about how Road to Zero Waste has been able to do that and address this issue of food waste and loss while still serving the community?
Thank you for having me. As some of you guys know, we launch community fridges in different parts of GTA, like in lower kind of income neighborhoods. So what we do is, when we establish community fridges, we let anybody who is in need of food come and just open the fridge and take it 24/7, any time of the day. There will be always some nutritious food from different, very reputable, very good food chains like Longo's, Starbucks, Ambrosia, and all kinds of food chains, and including Second Harvest. You guys have been doing an amazing job donating to us a lot of food, especially during this pandemic. It's been amazing how much you guys have been doing for us. So what we do is, when we establish community fridges, we only accept from food chains the excess surplus food, and then all that food goes into the fridge. Our volunteers, of course, audit and take care of the fridge, and people in need they could help themselves. So one thing I noticed is back in 2018, when we first launched our community fridge project in Rexdale area, a lot of people would take only fresh produce, and they would leave out best before date items that are like closer to best before date or like past before date. And they would leave out even a little bit uglier looking fruits and vegetables, maybe bananas with some spots. And I would be surprised, because we would just go around telling so many communities that are, because our Rexdale fridge was located in a very low income neighborhood. And we're very surprised that those people would do that. And then we started running different awareness sessions about food waste in that community. We went churches and different foodie festivals. And then we noticed that almost all the food started going like within a day or within few hours. Then we see sometimes when we're placing food, we see people who are taking the food. And a lot of times when we interview them, they say, I'm a single mother with 5 kids, and I have studies, and I'm like barely surviving. Or there are some new immigrants. They're like, we exhausted all our resources and came. We're trying to survive here until we find job, and our papers like kick in and all that stuff. We are just. I haven't seen bananas for 5 months or 3 months, so they're in that kind of condition. So those are the people we're serving, and especially new immigrants. What I notice when we launch in new immigrant areas, they are the ones who take everything, because in their back home in their countries, ugly fruit or ugly vegetable is not something to be thrown away. But in Canada, they think something is wrong with the shape. If the shape is not like the way that it should be, it's supposed to be, then they think like, hey, something is wrong with that, or best before date, for example, items. So what we noticed is in our organization, when we place all that surplus excess food, mostly new immigrants are the ones who are utilizing everything. And it's maybe that's why Western countries have more food waste than the countries that are, that are maybe developing countries, because they understand that there's nothing wrong with eating ugly fruit. There's nothing wrong with drinking milk past best before date, because they've been doing it culturally all the time. So I think education is the key. Even there are some homeless people in Canada that are using our fridges. Even they wouldn't take things that are closer to best before date. So what I noticed is after we launched our YouTube channel explaining about best before dates, and also educating the people about the food waste and all of that, and started posting our social media platforms different information about food waste, then people started approaching things differently. We even noticed that food doesn't stay in our fridges like for more than a couple hours anymore. Like hundreds and hundreds of needy families have been fed through this, and so much food we were able to rescue through launching community fridges all across GTA. And what also we noticed is that when you educate people, they immediately start taking action. So if we educate people the way we should be educating, through social media, through like some posters, like we do on all our fridges, we have posters that says like best before days, which product is good for how long. So after that, we noticed that there's a huge shift from like utilizing only the best ones to utilizing everything.
Right.
So education is the key. And also, I would say that, there are a lot more people nowadays, especially during COVID, that were laid off, and they personally call me saying, hey, would you guys have food like at this time, at that time? And they say, we'll take anything, because we don't have food, because we ran out of food that the food banks gave us. And I have a big family, this and that. So it's such a horrible situation right now that educating them would really go a long way, in my opinion.
Yeah, and like you sort of said and rang home, education is power. And the more we educate, the more people understand that there's that misconception that food waste looks like, food you can barely consume, but we see every day it's beautiful food that you purchase from the grocery store a lot of time. And speaking of education being power, we'd like to hear a little bit from Dr. Mike Masso from the University of Guelph, who's done a lot of research sort of around people's perceptions of food and date labeling and those kinds of things. Can you give us some more insights from the work you're doing, Michael? Well, you're on mute.
Thanks, and I'm really enjoying the program, and so thanks for the opportunity to contribute. I think there's a couple of things that I would say are critically important here. Is the fact that we're having this discussion first is probably a significant step. And Chris alluded to it. Just thinking about food waste reduces food waste, and having discussions and thinking about what sorts of things we can do becomes critically important. And I think that gets to some of the things like Rose was talking about earlier, is doing audits. I think that the more we understand at a granular level, the more we can make progress to finding ways to reducing it. The second point I'd make, if I could, is there's no silver bullet here. This is a complex problem. And if you look at why people waste, if you explore waste in 10 households, you'll find probably 35 reasons people throw things out. And so trying to find the solution to food waste is an impossible exercise. And so getting detailed analysis of what's happening and realizing that this is a difficult thing to do, because I think what we're seeing more and more is, if you look at, as an example, many people say, oh, well, I'm donating my excess food, and then they stop looking at ways that they can reduce. And while I think food rescue is awesome, and organizations like Second Harvest are doing amazing things, sometimes if we do a donation, it lets us off the hook mentally and say, okay, I've done my share on food waste. And we have to think about, again, Chris talked about things like smaller portions, thinking about how much we're putting in these sweets. Those are things that we can do at the household level. We're working with a lot of processors to say, where are your issues? Where are you? And again, every processor has a different reason that they're throwing things out, and helping them understand that becomes critically important. So again, getting back, rescue is great, but it shouldn't let us off the hook for reductions in terms of saying, what can we do in our organization so we're not throwing this out? At the household level, it's tough to rescue this stuff. But, and again, another way we're letting ourselves off the hook is, we've seen actually some evidence that when municipalities go to a green bin, we actually see food waste go up in those municipalities, because people say, I'm not wasting it, I'm doing something good. And again, lets us off the hook for doing things to reduction. And so to me, talking about it becomes critical, measuring it becomes critical, and recognizing that in each household it will take, or in each organization, it will take several different things in order for us to get to zero waste. And what's interesting, if I have another second, we had a project, an audit project interrupted by COVID, where we had finished some pre-audits just before the lockdown in March. We did 4 weeks of audits on a bunch of households. And then we were going to do interventions, and lockdown happened. We did audits of those households in the summer after a while of lockdown, and avoidable food waste on average went down, but for about 40% of households it went up. And so what that highlights is for some people having more time and thinking about it more, and not being able to eat out so they don't buy stuff and then throw it out when they don't eat it, was a good thing. But for other people, the fact that they were shopping less frequently and had problems with best before dates and managing inventories and those sorts of things. So while overall we saw a reduction, we saw 40% of families go up. And it just highlights that this isn't something that we can just say, if you do this, it will get better. It means you have to do this and this and this and this. And if I talk to the next household, it will be a different list. There are some general things we can do, but there is no silver bullet.
Yeah. And you were talking there a little bit, Michael, about these sort of three things. So measuring, talking about it in a corporate environment, organizational environment, at home with your families, and then sort of being able to take a multi-pronged approach to how you're addressing it within those environments. And I want to pass it over to Elliot, because I know Sobeys has been sort of doing that in different ways, and wondering if you can kind of unpack and talk to us a little bit more about what you guys are doing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be part of this panel discussion and part of this event. So happy to share some thoughts from a Sobeys perspective. So as a retailer, the graph that Rose showed earlier, you know, when you look at the number in that regard, you might think, well, retail is not the biggest piece of the problem here, but I would say that we are a connector of the problem, which is we are the space in which most folks get their food from a grocery retailer in some way. And so food comes into farms, from the production, from the processing end of things. Food goes to consumers in the household end of things. And so we sort of connect all those various aspects of the piece of the pie. So we certainly have our role to play. And that's really the role, the approach that we take from a Sobeys perspective. Our biggest concern for us is surplus food in our stores. And there's multitude of reasons why there's surplus food. Sometimes a lot of it is based on sort of, expectations of what you expect to see when you walk into a grocery store, full shelves, and freshness of the product, and being able to maintain those standards can lead to food waste and or surplus food. Sometimes it's distribution errors, right? Shipments of products that are sent in error. And one thing that's also come to my attention recently is mislabeling, but not from a food safety perspective where there's a product recall, but mislabeling from a manufacturer where the product itself is not exactly what it is. So a quick example is orange juice that's been mislabeled as orange juice without pulp, but actually it's orange juice with pulp. So the issue there is that because it's mislabeled, it's not that there's nothing wrong with it. All of that orange juice needs to be pulled. And you can imagine doing that across hundreds of stores that, because the orange juice is labeled without pulp and it's actually with pulp, all of that needs to be pulled. So multitude of reasons why we've got surplus food in our stores. And, I really like what you're saying, Michael, about really focusing very much on reduction and not just what we're doing at the end of the day. I think just hierarchically, we approach it in a similar way, which is, prevent the food waste from happening, reduce and redistribute it as much as possible, and then alternatives to landfill through organics, for example, an organics program. So whether it's our ordering practices that we utilize, and, we see this as a journey. So, we currently have some practices and processes when it relates to ordering, markdown programs that we have. These are Enjoy Tonight stickers that help us move product that's close to that best before date. We've got regional food rescue programs with a number of partners across country. And we're always looking to onboard new partnerships and new ways to reduce our footprint. So we're on a journey, I would say, from a retailer perspective. And we have begun this journey. And I think we've got a long way to go. And I'm looking forward to sort of adding some more color to that in some of the later questions. But I really see our role from a retail perspective as a connector, working upstream with suppliers and distributors, as well as downstream with our customers.
Absolutely, and we're looking forward to hearing a little bit more on that too.
Mm-hmm.
And then Bob, you've spent years in food education, food entertainment. What can you tell us about some of the things you've witnessed in the food waste and loss space, and especially when we're thinking about household consumers and users?
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me, and I'm here on behalf of Second Harvest, for whom I'm an ambassador, and also Love Food, Hate Waste. I've seen in the last few years that I have been an ambassador where my consciousness of this is sort of raised, and my appreciation for sharing the knowledge as broadly as I can. I always come back to the same thought, which is in the world of climate change, most of the issues are so big that any one person is overwhelmed and they feel like, how can I help move the needle in climate change when I'm just one person? But when it comes to food waste, especially at home, every individual can completely solve the issue in their own individual homes. And it just boils down to the same thing we keep hearing, which is about education. But the beautiful thing is that there are very few hoops that the average Canadian has to jump through when they're talking about reducing their food waste, because this is really ultimately throwing things out from the refrigerator, things that they don't think they can eat at that point. So part of it is being proactive and educating them to be proactive. The other part, for example, is like, just went to my refrigerator before we started this. This is a fennel bulb. Traditionally, this is all we eat, but truthfully, this whole part of the fennel bulb, the whole top part, unbelievably delicious. And I mean, it's like a very licoricey dill.
Can I have some?
You can put this in salads, bean salads. You can put it in risottos. You can make you can make pesto with it. There's so many things you can do. And the consumer just really needs to be educated to the fact that anytime they get a head of fennel or some radishes that come with radish leaves, or turnips with turnip leaves, all these things are great. And it's about us educating those consumers to understand that. Here's another example. It's October. Everyone's going to go out and buy a pumpkin. They're going to carve it. They're going to put it on their front lawn or their front windowsill. And after Halloween, they're going to throw it out. This is a gorgeous kabocha squash that happens to taste delicious. So why don't we just all get accustomed to putting a whole squash in our window, lighting it, and then the day after Halloween, you roast it and you make soup with it, or you eat it any number of ways. So you take that times every single thing that we're throwing out. And also, I think another problem is the abundance, and really convincing people that just because food is abundant doesn't mean that they should squander it. And once we make people aware of the problem, which truthfully a lot of people still aren't aware. We talk about food waste like it's something that everybody knows about. But the analogy I like to make is that 10 years ago, we'd all leave the grocery store, or 15 years ago, with 10 plastic bags, and we wouldn't think anything of it. Now we've been conditioned to bring our own reusable bags and not to take plastic bags like it's an endless, stream of plastic bags that will just always be there for us. So educating the population about the issue is the first step, and then providing them with ideas and resources is the second step. And it's really, honestly, of all of the various issues in climate change and the various lanes that everyone can take to help solve the problem, this is by far and away the simplest, because it's really about creativity and resourcefulness and maybe a little bit of frugality. And Canadians have all three of those qualities, in spades.
We totally do. Yeah. And just kind of picking up on that, Bob. So I know we could talk to you guys for hours, and we don't, unfortunately, have as much time as we'd like to. So maybe we can do some sort of more rapid fiery answers to these next couple of questions. But you all talked about some really interesting sort of solutions. So thinking about measurement and education and getting creative in the kitchen and really thinking outside of what we might be accustomed to in terms of how you can use products. For the panel, maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. We'll start with Bob. What are some innovations you've seen in this space, or some key opportunities that are helping us address the issue of food loss and waste right now?
Well, the biggest opportunity is awareness, because when it comes to food waste in the home, I don't think there really are innovations, because the problem is the same. It's a simple situation of you got a refrigerator and you have a garbage, and you just have to interfere with the food going from the refrigerator to the garbage. So it doesn't require innovation. In fact, it doesn't require anything. That's my phone ringing to accentuate my point. But that's the beautiful thing. No innovation is required. And you can't say that about a lot of other problems that we're trying to solve.
In some ways, it's almost like a back to basics, sort of more old school, like how are we preserving, are we canning, are we like thinking like that for when we're talking about household users too.
I always tell a quick story, which is that all we really need to do is put a fake surveillance camera in everybody's kitchen. And if people knew that all of their friends and the rest of the world was watching them throw out that quarter of an onion in their refrigerator or after they finished cooking because they were just too lazy to wrap it up and put it back in the fridge, if that surveillance camera was there, they wouldn't do that. They'd be embarrassed. And we just need to create a consciousness that is the equivalent of a surveillance camera in their kitchen.
Yeah, new government surveillance policy coming to address food waste and loss.
Fake camera so that they're reminded. It doesn't have to be a real one.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely
know
true.
what's going on in the kitchens of Canadians, to paraphrase Pierre Trudeau.
So true. And Ellie, how about in a sort of corporate environment, opportunities and innovations that you see?
Yeah, so I agree with Bob in keeping it back to basics, certainly on a household perspective. Taking it from from an organizational perspective, I think, similar to everything else when it comes to innovation, I think the advent of technology to help us address food waste is a really exciting and really the forefront. I mean, that's the way we're going to have to move forward, is to have technology enable us. So, there are already a number of food waste innovations, apps, both for consumers as well as for restaurants and food retail and food service to donate their food, like the foodrescue.ca platform. From a retail perspective, I think about predictive analytics and the power of data to help support addressing overproduction and how much we actually sell through. The power of information to tell us exactly how many salads we're going to sell on a given day based on the temperature of the weather outside. Like, that's the kind of stuff that I think is really exciting, that can really arm us with the type of information that we need to make sure the product that we're putting out there meets the needs of our customers and doesn't end up as excess food. So I would say technology really would be the way, and using data would be the way forward from an innovation perspective that is exciting and something that I want to keep an eye on moving forward.
So thanks, Ellie. And how about Dr. Mike Van Masso, in your research studies, you talked about different tools and what are sort of some of the key opportunities?
So I'm gonna talk about two things, and the first is a bit of a hobby horse of mine, and we're doing some work with the Guelph Family Health Study right now, where we're doing food literacy and food skills development. And I'm gonna sound like a grumpy old man, stay off my lawn, but when I was young, we got taught some food basics in school. And I think it's criminal that we don't do that anymore. And it would go a long way to addressing some of the opportunities that Bob talked about in terms of what can you do. We've worked with the Guelph Family Health Study to do sort of cookbooks. What can you do with an excess stuff that's in your fridge? What can you, and not only do we need to make them aware, we need to give them the skills to do the things that they're doing. The second thing, and I'm going to follow up on Bob's on Bob's surveillance proposal, which may be a little bit hard to sell, even if it's a fake camera. But what we find is if we do audits of households and say, look, this is what you're throwing out, people are aghast. And so if we could, and audits aren't cheap. If we can help people even do it themselves, if they see what's in their bin, and we've gone back to say, look, do you have any idea what you're throwing out? They go, oh God. And people are embarrassed, Bob. We look at food. We do audits of all three people's waste streams, and we find things that they find embarrassing hidden in the garbage. They don't even put it in the green bin because they feel this sense of guilt. And while we may not put in a camera in, I think we can do audits. And the other thing I think we can do, I saw a comment in the chat that said transparent compost bins, and it probably makes more sense than you think. In Guelph, where we've done a bunch of audits, they transitioned from translucent bags to carts. And with translucent bags, your neighbors could see what you were throwing out. They could see the volume that you were throwing out. We actually think some of that went up after they went to carts because people weren't embarrassed to put it at the curb anymore. And if they found contamination in your bags, they'd put a sticker on it. You'd get home and your neighbors would all see that your stuff didn't get picked up because because you weren't a good sorter. But now if it's in a cart, you might get a sticker, but no one can tell whether it's picked up or not. No one can tell how full it is. So maybe we can do some of those things, not only do audits, but find ways to create some social pressure and create new norms about waste.
And Layla, you know, you hear Michael talking about like sort of creating social pressure, but also just finding more space to educate. Wondering from you and all the work Road to Zero Waste has been doing, what sort of innovations or opportunities are you seeing or that have helped your cause?
I totally agree with all of you guys. At the same time, I'm on a little bit of different standpoint. When you do old school way, nowadays, especially our youth or people who are just getting married and having children and all of that, they will not pay that much attention because they're in this rushy lifestyle. They need something which excites them, which makes them think, some graphics, some through social media, through different ways. We have to touch their hearts. Otherwise, just doing simple data, this and that, might not be as touchy because from our personal experience, when we run awareness workshops at different vicinities, we notice when you do different activities and show them this is in your household, this is how you do. And when we do like a more interactive way, or when our graphics are more touchy, that way they take home saying that that's it, I'm definitely applying it. And also like all of you guys heard of Chef Jagger Gordon, right? He's doing an amazing job right now in the sphere of food waste. When I personally spoke to him, like we exchanged some ideas and information, and I see that he is trying to tackle it like nationally, right, across Canada. And number one thing that he's trying to do is, apart from educating, he opened his grocery store, which is, you know, pay what you can, and everything is only surplus food there, right? Or like you could look into our community fridge project. Everybody says like, oh man, this is such an interesting thing. In other countries, they buy from the store and then they place it. But in yours, only surplus excess food is allowed. And this is reducing food waste. And a lot of neighbors started putting a lot of food in our community fridges. And we're noticing that when you use different innovations, different like not the ways that we normally do, but different other ways to get to people, try to spread awareness, they pay more attention. I think social media nowadays is gonna, you know, is going to really explode if we try to put all the information, try to like send it to people to teach them about food waste in different ways. I think that will resonate with them in, you know, reducing food waste, at least in their households. So I personally heard so many stories, like after we educated and after they tuned into our awareness sessions, they're like, man, like I have been like applying and you have no idea how much money I saved. So this is for them, like that kind of kick, right? Like giving them tips, we give them tips, we teach them, educate them, like, you know, the different like creative ways. And then they say, man, not only it's about food waste, also about my pocket, right? So I could save so much more. And you have to entice them in different ways, because psychology of people are such, so what? I'm going to die tomorrow. I don't care about the climate change. I don't have kids, so I don't have to leave the world to anybody. There are some people who think that way. So we have to touch people's hearts different ways, entice them different ways. So that's what I'm trying to say. Just doing different different ways to tackle food waste would be amazing, like some extraordinary ways, I would say.
Understanding the different audiences and incentives encourage, and Chef Chris, insights from you working in culinary for years, opportunities and innovations.
So, you know, I mean, for us, the bottom line and waste are directly correlated. So same for Sobeys, you know, we can't, it is not in our interest to make too much food to give it to Second Harvest. That is not our goal. And one thing about this whole exercise we've done with you guys is that it has really demonstrated those gaps in knowledge within our group. We've always done it this way. Well, you know what? Maybe that's not the right way. Maybe that's too much. Maybe it's the wrong thing, including, you know, a lot of those analytics have shown us things like, you know what, why mix everything with the dressing if they're not going to eat it all? Maybe you only need to mix this much with the dressing. If they finish it, sure, then we'll give them more. You know, so the way we actually operate our business is a little different because of all of this, because we know that once we've made something totally perishable, there is no way to recover it internally or to give it away. So a lot of learning that went on there. And Michael, love your idea about schools. I will say that if you think about what we do in Ontario for our kids, we don't really give them any of these tools. Quebec has been incredibly successful doing this. Table de Chef in Montreal has managed to get kitchens back into 700 schools, public schools in Quebec. So I don't know about the rest of the country, but Ontario really needs to pull up their socks on that one, because most kids wouldn't know to eat the bottom of a fennel, let alone the top.
So we're coming up just on 3:45 here already. It's amazing. So I do want to hear from all of you one key action item. What's one thing everyone in our audience can challenge themselves to do today? But before that, there was a couple of questions coming through from the audience. So I might throw a few of them out there to panelists who are able or would like to comment. We have a question from Stephen. France's food waste law since 2016. So they put a law in place, sort of making it mandatory for food retailers to have to donate their surplus to charitable organizations. What are your thoughts, and how do you think Canada should adopt something similar? So maybe we'll pass this to Michael to start. Or Layla.
So I think that mandating donation can cause problems and create undue burdens on organizations like Second Harvest. And so if we do things properly, if we've got foodrescue.ca, we've got Second Harvest, we've got ambassadors that make connections to organizations like Sobeys, like MLSE, where we're making real progress. The problem becomes if you are mandated not to throw something out and it's something that Second Harvest can't use, we run into trouble. So I am always a much bigger fan of saying, here is the opportunity. We've developed the infrastructure. The fact that we now have trucks that can maintain the cold chain makes it easier. So to me, facilitating the infrastructure is a much better approach than mandating that you can't absolutely throw things out, because it doesn't actually solve the root of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Can I just jump in as well?
Please do.
Yeah, I totally agree with Mark. And on a personal level, I have witnessed many times, like some of the homeless shelters, they used to get donations dumped into their vicinity, like all kinds of donations. And they'll say, what are we going to do with all of that? And what they do is they'll just dump them back into the bin, the garbage bin. So they will be like, so what can we do with all of that food, right? We cannot do anything. So we can only eat that much. And you see, we're running into a lot of problem when if we get mandated to donate to different vicinities or different nonprofits, then their capacity might not allow them to utilize it, or just managing all of that. Like you see, we're running into a huge problem, as Mark said. So I would say we'll have to start from the root of the problem. Like we'll have to go into retail. We'll have to go into the biggest areas where food waste has been occurring. We'll have to go to those sectors first and educate them and implement different innovative ways to reduce food waste, and households, right? Everywhere. If we try to educate, spread awareness, that will help us more than reducing food waste at that level. But at the same time, yes, we could definitely, give some incentives to some organizations that are or food chains that are donating their excess food to nonprofits. We could give some kind of, tax breaks or something, definitely. But at the same time, if it's forcefully done, we're going to run into a huge problem, in my opinion.
And there are so many great questions coming in the chat box. So what we're going to do for sure is collect all the questions after the event. We might tap on our panelists one more time to see if they can help us answer some of them. And we'll be sending it out to all of the guests. But maybe one more question, and this might be for Ellie or for Bob. How do we educate the average Canadian to accept so-called ugly fruits and veg, to bring them into their day-to-day life? Yeah, would love to get your thoughts on that.
Sure, I'll jump in there first, Bob, if that's okay. I think we have to give them practical tools. We have to make it easier on people, right? To sort of pick up on Leilo's point there about being creative, being tactile, giving people tools that they feel that they can actually use and apply at home. Literally in market right now as we speak at Sobeys, this week we launched a food waste campaign that was exactly that. It was practical tips and tools for people can do at home around canning, around dehydrating, around how do I use my fridge properly? Like, how do I store things in my fridge properly to help prevent food waste? We have to make it easier. And so I think there's a number of different tactics, right? Like social media, absolutely, because we all live on our phones these days. Video, use of celebrities, keeping it interesting, getting creative. There's a ton of resources out there. And I think it's really about empowering people to know that they can do this, that there are a lot of creative uses for the food that they have in their fridge. It's just a matter of, the education needs to be constant, right? And so it's not that, you're going to do one campaign. It's consistently having that message throughout, from a retail perspective, everything that we do, month over month, week over week is being very consistent in that message, and make it fun and make it easy. I think generally speaking, helps with adoption.
For sure.
I think in terms of education, just to pick up on what you're talking about, it's like we all know that if kids are involved in a garden, they're more inclined to eat things that they wouldn't eat before. And I think it really is about starting with the family and with young kids and sort of turning it into a bit of a game, and how can we use up these things? Or I'm going to blindfold you and I'll give you $100 if you can tell me which is the ugly fruit and which wasn't the ugly fruit. It all tastes the same. It's kind of mind-boggling to me as a food person that people don't want the ugly fruit. And I know that stores like Sobeys you're creating shelves with discounted ugly fruit and stuff like that. And I think it's a battle, but I think eventually it's one that we can definitely win, because sooner or later people figure out that they're just saving money and getting the exact same product. But we have to wage the battle and create the education.
We just finished a study that looked at apples in a shopping context, and price obviously makes a difference. Putting them in bags instead of bulk made a difference. It made it less obvious that they were imperfect. Once people got them, they weren't unhappy with them, but we have this sort of visual bias that we don't want to pick them. So putting them in bags made a difference, and what you called them made a difference too. Instead of calling them, we had 3 names, and I'm going to struggle to remember exactly what they were, but we called them Canada number 2, which is the grade, right? But as soon as you called them Canada number 2, people thought, instead of Canada Fancy, people thought they weren't as good. And so thinking about the name, I think the best name we came up was All Shapes by Nature. I can't take credit for it, but that made a difference, made people more willing to buy both bagged and bulk. So we need to think a little bit creative. I agree with some of the education things, but we can also do some marketing things that will help people overcome those biases that they have in the store.
How about calling them apple pie apples?
Yeah. Apples.
When it's in an apple pie or it's in pressed apple juice, and
it doesn't matter. Yeah.
Well, that gets back to my hobby horse. We have to help people make pies, right? I talk to first-year students and say, how many of you guys are afraid to go out, get out of residence and live and live on your own? And almost all of them put their hands up. And the biggest fear is I feed myself effectively. And so, they're struggling with the instructions on a box of Kraft Dinner, and we're asking them to make pie, right?
And there's some really interesting conversations happening in the chat. A lot of people talking about that, like sort of when we used to have home economics and this food education being built into the curriculum and into the school system again. Lots of questions for all the panelists. So we're going to follow up, but we're running out of time. So if our panelists can keep it to sort of less than 20 seconds rapid fire, would love to hear from you guys. What's one thing one challenge you would issue to folks in the audience that they can do today to address food waste and loss. And we will start with Layla.
Okay, 20 seconds. So what we recently started doing with all our awareness sessions is we asked them to buy this kind of plastic box from a dollar store or somewhere, and they place, you know, some food that are going bad fast, or like, for example, half an onion, or have a potato you cut for some recipe, and leftovers left there. So you place, this is a leftover box or some kind of box where within a day or two you have to utilize. So you get creative. So I would encourage all of you guys at home, just buy that thing and try to put all the things in your fridge that you would have to utilize within a couple days max. So you would get so creative and utilizing, honestly, and it's very very interesting as well. So try to do that at home, and it does wonders. Trust me, you can become really creative and utilizing it.
I noted, Layla. and Chef Z.
I'd say if you can, try to get away from letting vanity make decisions for you. Are you concerned about the appearance of what it looks like to others, or how much food you have in your fridge, or how much you buy, or how much you put on the table? I think they'll respect you a lot if you give them the right amount of food and you make it delicious. I think that's all that matters. And then pass that knowledge down to your kids. It's so critical that they know that they're not deciding something because they want to look cool on Instagram.
But I mean, we do want to look cool on Instagram, right? So we can make that cool. No, absolutely. Thank you so much, Chef. And Bob.
Well, I'm going to take an example that I always use, which is even the last, say, 3% of a plastic, yogurt container. That last 3% that we just looked at, and we toss it because we're too lazy to scoop that out with a rubber spatula. You take that 3% times the number of yogurt containers that are sold across the country times a month, and you're probably talking about, saving 250,000 containers of yogurt. So if I were to do one thing, I would brand a very small, thin spatula, and I would send it to everybody in the country. And I would say, use this every time you've got just that little bit of, even if it's cookie batter, we're throwing bits of it down the sink, and those 3% add up.
Absolutely. And Bob, I will be waiting for my spatula. And Michael.
Take a look at what you're throwing out. Every day, look in your green bin. If you don't have a green bin, look in your garbage. If you want to do it for a week, challenge yourself to write down every piece of organic matter that you throw into either your green bin or your garbage pail. That's a good way to audit, and it will open your eyes, and it will, just that exercise will mean that the next time you do it, it'll be less.
Yeah, track, measure,
accountability.
Yeah.
Accountability.
Yes.
And closing it out for us, Ellie.
Wow, so many great ideas have already been shared. I will get very personal on this one. I've got 2 toddler boys at home, and that means I go through a lot of, I don't want this tonight, Mama, or why did you make this one? And subsequently a lot of food waste because of picky eaters. So what I end up doing quite a lot is taking their leftovers and making something else that my husband and I eat. So he doesn't know it, but I hide a lot of their leftovers in our food. So
Awesome.
Usually people do that. Moms do that to feed their kids. Their kids. But you're fooling your husband.
I am. He had some potatoes yesterday that, guess what?
That is a great challenge issued, I think, for a lot of people out there. So I just want to thank each and every panelist who's been with us here today. We are so proud at Second Harvest to be connected and working with all of you in different ways. You've given us a lot of food for thought on this Food Waste Friday. So again, thanks to you guys for this and for your commitment to reducing food waste. The challenges have been issued, and we'd love to hear to all the audience members which challenges you're taking on. So let us know, tweet at us, tag us on whatever social media platform you're on, or email us or pick up the phone, old school, whatever you want to do. We want to hear which challenges you're finding useful in your environments and your day-to-day life. I know we're running a little bit behind schedule. I'm sorry, but I'm going to flip it back to my colleagues who are going to close it out for us, talk a little bit about the raffle for our audience members. And I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Thanks again, and happy Food Waste Friday.
Mhm.
Fantastic. Oh my goodness. I was just like jumping in my seat, like scribbling things down. Yeah, fantastic insights. Thank you, panelists. You guys are freaking fantastic. We love all of you. Thank you for your insight and your time today. So yeah, we're at the end of our event, folks. So before we push off, I'd love for us to put our last poll of the event. If you could pull that up, if you could take a few seconds to quickly put in your answers, and that would be fantastic. Amazing. Maybe give it a couple more seconds.
Everyone's off to their happy hour now.
Pondering, ready to jump in and all those amazing challenges. Yeah, for me, I specifically really love the challenge of writing everything down of organics that I throw. I'm going to try that out and see how much I do throw. All right, fantastic. Sounds good. Okay, so as Kira mentioned, because you guys were so great and the attendees have been fantastic, we did promise that we would give you an opportunity to win one of our Food Rescue Hero swag gifts. So how this will work is that at the end of this event, we will pull 4 amazing winners who have attended today's event, and then we will call you and send you these amazing zero waste gifts. So please monitor your emails for an email from Second Harvest. So however, I did want to highlight one specific item specifically. So today we're also giving away a sustainable living zero waste gift box that's valued at $70 to one of our lucky attendees. And to win the chance for this amazing gift box, it's very simple. We just want to hear from you. So using your phone, video, however you want to do it, send us a 15 to 30-second clip answering one question, and that is, what's one thing you learned today? So please send it to any of our social media handles. We are Second Harvest CA on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and please use the hashtag Tackling Food Waste 2020. And I want to echo my team's sentiments. I want to do quickly a great thank you to OTF for the support of this project and for being here. Jennifer, thank you so much for taking time. I want to thank you all to our panelists who have been amazing. Your insights have just been blowing our minds. So we thank you for your time and for your amazing, just innovative ideas in reducing food waste. And I want to thank everybody who joined us today from across the nation. It was fantastic to have you. We wish you a safe Halloween for those who are somehow kind of celebrating it. And we wish you all the best as we enter into this trying time. And we hope to see you in the next event. Thank you, folks, for joining us. This was fantastic.